All right, and we're back. And so, um, what is new and improved with our arthropods? Well, one of the big things you're going to notice is everything has to do with surface area at this point. As we get bigger, and you're going to notice this with all of the organisms at this point, and that's why I wanted to focus this on arthropods. So arthropods being terrestrial, well, most of them, or a lot of them. And so as they are terrestrial, that's going to mean that they've got to deal with some interesting complexities, right? They can't lose water, right? And so they need something protective. Think about a jellyfish out of water on the beach; they're just going to dry up. And so you've got a big problem here. If you're terrestrial, you need some way to block water loss. And so the exoskeleton is going to be very, very helpful here. However, there's another thing that you now lose because you've got an exoskeleton. When you have an exoskeleton, or in the case of our skin, while it's going to help reduce water loss, that means you can't use your skin as the absorptive surface area. So remember, with our sponges and cnidarians, you could just have very, very easy ways to get your oxygen just diffuses in from the outside. Water, or on the inside, same with the jellyfish. And the flatworms are flat. They're not very bulky. They stay thin, and then that means the oxygen can reach all of the tissues. But as soon as you get big, as soon as you go on land, you've got a problem. You're going to naturally close off that outside because you want to prevent water loss, but now you need to get your oxygen. And so what you're going to start seeing are organs such as gills. We did see them with the mollusks, but I wanted to save them for now. So you have gills, you have book lungs in the case of the spiders, and then as we get into the terrestrial ones like insects or millipedes or centipedes, they have what are called trachea that open up through spiracles, and spiracles are basically the little openings that lead to tubes called trachea. And then buried deep within are the air sacs. And so the spiracles are actually found all along the body of an insect. And that, in its own way, is increasing the surface area. And that is hugely important. So you'll notice with the gills are very feathery. And the feathers mean that you're going to allow for more absorption of water through those gills. So the other thing you might notice, and if you've ever been fishing, gills in fish, and same thing with crayfish and lobsters, they're going to be full of blood vessels. And that's because blood now is where we're going to distribute the oxygen. So there's a very tight relationship. You have gills or trachea or book lungs, and all along those are going to be capillaries that are going to carry blood. Now, when we get to vertebrates, we'll tackle the other ones here, the air sacs and the lungs on birds and mammals. But right now, we're just doing invertebrates. The other thing I wanted to point out now is the digestive system. And the digestive system, at this point on, starting with the worms, not the flatworms, but the segmented worms, at that point, we're going to see a complete digestive system. Now, a complete digestive system, all animals have some form of mouth, pharynx, which, throat, right? The pharynx, esophagus, in some form. And then small intestine, large intestine. Now, in birds and lizards, you're going to see what's called a cloaca. But in other vertebrates, the large intestine just goes directly to the anus and then out of the body. Now, what are some shared things? Well, all at this point, we're going to start seeing chambers developing so that the animals can specialize in digestion. So, in some cases, like birds and lizards and even the earthworms, you have a crop and gizzard, and a crop is going to store food. Gizzard is going to chew. In other animals, you have a stomach, which is very similar to a crop and gizzard. So you want to think of the stomach as being kind of or the crop gizzard stomach as being kind of the first stopping point. These are specialized chambers that help with physical digestion, eating, chewing, grinding, storing. And so you've got the mouth parts that, for instance, the crabs have that pick the pieces of food from the ocean or the dead fish, the mandibles of grasshoppers, the crop, the gizzard, the stomach, that all basically mush the food up and make it smaller so that the chemical digestion speeds up. Now, the chemical digestion is where you are going to see enzymes break down the food into smaller chemicals. So starches are broken down into sugars, proteins are broken down into amino acids. And at this point, you have the stomach, and I typed interesting, it should be intestine. That was autocomplete there. The intestine. So the stomach and small intestine are going to be the organs that are going to engage in chemical digestion. And here we start seeing an enormous increase in length. And we start seeing the adaptations of having villi that increase, guess what? The surface area. So again, the bigger the bodies, the more surface area you need to increase absorption. And so the small intestine especially is going to have villi and microvilli that are going to help secrete enzymes, digest, and then absorb the nutrients into the blood vessels that surround the intestine. Now, not so much with the smaller invertebrates, but the bigger we get, the more accessory organs we have. So we've got liver or pancreas that is going to create enzymes, but they secrete their enzymes into the small intestine. And then, generally speaking, the large intestine is going to be for water reabsorption. Again, you're terrestrial, you don't want to lose water, and water was being put into the system as you're digesting. So, large intestine or the cloaca, its job is to pull water back into the body so whatever waste you make is more solid. Otherwise, you're going to dehydrate very quickly. So just to underscore this right here, of course, this is human, but you're going to see this in a lot of animals. The small intestine, you see these folds, and the folds, if you were to magnify that, the folds have villi, which are folds and projections from the small intestine lining. And the villi have blood vessels, capillaries in them, and the nutrients are absorbed through the villus into the blood system, and that's how the animal gets the nutrients. So, the more villi you have, the more capillaries you have, the more nutrients you can absorb. Extraordinarily efficient. So much so that animals that are carrying babies that need more nutrients, they can actually grow their villi longer so they absorb more. So that'll tell you just how much. It's been estimated that, at least for the human, the villus increases the surface area the villus and the microvilli increase the surface area 600 fold, similar to a tennis court. and that would be, and then the microvilli are extensions from the actual cells. So I hope that gives you some helpful idea of how the animal kingdom is really getting more and more complex. The last invertebrate phylum we're going to look at are going to be the echinoderms.